Hello and welcome to Insight. I am Amandra Bhatt. On Monday, the Government of India signed a framework agreement with the Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland, the NSCN-IM faction, an armed rebel group paving the way to end the country's oldest insurgency. While the terms of the agreement are not yet known, it has been reported that the NSCN-IM leadership has accepted the supremacy of the Indian Constitution. New Delhi on its part has said that it accepts the uniqueness of the Naga history and culture and indicated its willingness to give Nagas living outside Nagaland autonomy in governance. The Naga problem has persisted ever since India became independent, and the talk with insurgent groups has been going on, and so has the insurgency. Today in Insight, we discuss the significance of this agreement and whether it will be acceptable to all stakeholders. And to discuss the Naga deal, we have with us in the studios an eminent panel. Please welcome Dr. Namrata Goswami, a research fellow with the Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis. Welcome to the program, Dr. Goswami. Sitting next to her is Kalyan Barua, senior journalist, a bureau chief with the Assam Tribune. Welcome to the program, Mr. Barua. Sitting next to him is Captain Alok Bansal. He is a noted strategic affairs analyst, currently director, India Foundation. Welcome to the program, Captain Bansal. We are also joined by Dr. A. Bimol Akoijam. He is an associate professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Welcome to the program, Professor Akoijam. And before we begin the discussion, let's take you through what Minister of State for Home Affairs Kiren Rijiju had to say when he spoke to Lok Sabha television on this deal.
Present government headed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has given a very due importance to secure peace in northeastern region. One of the important dimension of the whole effort is to come into understanding with some of the groups who are struggling for very long time in their respective region. One of this important group is the NSCN-IM. The Prime Minister's effort to bring them into the mainstream has borne fruit into the recent agreement being signed. Now this is a framework agreement which broadly describes how Government of India gives very much importance to the aspiration of the Naga people, and from the NSCN side also, who have agreed to the terms within the ambit of Indian Constitution to integrate themselves in a broader way to work for the betterment of the Naga people and to secure peace in the region. NSCN Kaplan group has, they have abrogated a ceasefire without the knowledge of the Government of India. We were very upset that the ceasefire, which was in existence for a long time, more than decades, has been abrogated suddenly, resulting in some violence, loss of lives, and some unwanted incident took place. We hope that they will understand that peace is the ultimate objective of all of us. And the Nagaland government and the civil societies are pleading the NSCN Kaplan group to abjure violence and come to the mainstream.
Minister of State for Home Affairs Kiren Rijiju there speaking about the framework agreement signed between the Government of India and the National Socialist Council of Nagaland's IM faction, an agreement which many say provides an historic opportunity to bring an end to India's oldest insurgency. Dr. Goswami, I'd like to begin with you. 6-decade-long insurgency, almost 2-decade-long talks between the Government of India and this particular group. What are the issues involved here?
I think first of all the insurgency historically is pretty old. It started in 1918 actually, when the Naga Club came into existence, but it got violent in 1955 under the Naga National Council. So I think the most important thing is to understand the length of the insurgency historically.
Right.
And historically the main issues even under the Naga National Council was recognition of Naga culture, land rights, and their history. So in 1947 in June, they actually had signed the Akbar-Haidari agreement. And if you reflect back and look at the framework agreement that we have signed today, it mostly repeats what the Akbar-Haidari agreement had stated in 1947 itself. And that is to recognize the unique culture and history of the Nagas. So that was one issue.
Okay.
I think the problem was that because there were differences in the leadership of the insurgency, so then you had Muiva and Su breaking out. They were actually originally Naga National Council members, but then they broke away in 1980 and formed the National Socialist Council of Nagaland. And Khaflang, interestingly, was also a part of the Naga National Council. And then leadership differences again broke the NSCN, right? So that was one issue.
Okay.
I think the second issue was the demand for territorial integration of all Naga inhabited areas. So the argument given by the NSCN, IM, and the NSCN-K also to an extent is that mostly the demand is to include all contiguous. Now this is an important, outlier, and that is all contiguous Naga inhabited areas have to be included within a common administrative structure. So that was the second issue. The third issue was sovereignty. So they had demanded that we will secede from India. Now these are the three issues that have led this insurgency for so long. Now in terms of the accord itself, if we come today, again the accord, if you see historically, it's not the first time that such a peace accord has been signed.
Right.
As I said, in Akbar-Haidari agreement was signed. Then you had in 1964-68 the peace mission was established. Again there was some kind of understanding that there would be dialogue between India and the insurgent group. And then we had the 1975 Shillong Accord.
Right.
So if you look at the provisions of the Shillong Accord, again exactly what we are stating today, and that is the Naga National Council members agreed to give up violence and accept the framework of the Indian Constitution. But then Muiva and Su actually revolted on exactly the same terms they have signed on today. So it's very fascinating. So these are the main issues. And I think the obstacles came because the areas that the NSCN IM claim as contiguous, for instance, the district I come from, Dima Hasao district, is included in the Greater Nagalim map. But if you look at it from a fieldwork basis, I went and did a bit of fieldwork, I realized that these areas are not contiguous. You have very different ethnic groups in these areas. And I think those were the main focal issues that created the negotiation pathology for so long.
And for the benefit of our viewers, if you could tell us what exactly is meant by contiguous areas.
So basically when I spoke to Punting Shimrang, who is one of the NSCN IM leaders in 2007-8, his definition, he made it very clear. Contiguous areas are areas in which you have Naga villages contiguously, territorially established. So basically connected to Nagaland. So if you look at the map, this would include the border areas of Assam, the districts of Dima Hasao and Karbi Anglong. It would include Tirap Changlang in Arunachal Pradesh and the 4 districts of Manipur, the hill districts, which are all, they argue, is contiguous. And by contiguous, they also categorize almost all the small ethnic groups. For instance, the Anal. The Anal is actually not Naga by terminology and origin, but then the NSCN-IM recognizes them as Naga to create this contiguous territory. So that's what they meant by contiguous. And what is also very interesting from an insurgency research perspective is that they also included areas in Myanmar. So it just didn't include areas in India. But you know, you also have to understand that historically these areas, so the British drew the line in 1947, right? Dividing, and India accepted that line. So this is actually the British line much before. 1914 there was an arrangement, and then 1941 they drew a line with Burma. There was an understanding with Burma. And the problem is that many of the contiguous villages were actually divided because of the modern state coming in and international borders being accepted, which were historically not there. And that is why the Naga concept of territory is based on their traditional understanding of what their territory was historically.
But Mr. Bharua, you know, a lot of emphasis has been laid on, this cultural identity of the Nagas being accepted. How significant is that point according to you? The question of cultural integration.
Yeah, culturally, you see, the Nagas are not very major tribe. I mean, not a huge number of population. The population is limited. They feel that if outsiders come and if they are not allowed to protect their own cultural identity, they feel threatened. Like they don't want to mix up like that. historically speaking also they were very protected society, sort of. So the tribes never like to, one of the main issues is that, same in case of other states also, the tribes in other states, they feel threatened, in fact. They feel threatened from outsiders. They feel threatened in Assam, for instance, they feel threatened from Bangladeshis, and Nagas, they feel threatened from outsiders. So basically they want to retain their culture, their historical identity. So that is one of the major issues, which the government is also trying. I believe the accord also has a huge number of provisions to safeguard their cultural identity, including setting up of cultural centers and stuff like that.
Right. Captain Bansal, you know, there have been as many as 80 rounds of talks since 1997. What's different this time? Because we understand Mr. R. Ravi, who's a former special director of the IB, was made the interlocutor by the Prime Minister just last year in August 2014, and in less than a year this accord has been delivered.
I think see, the answer to this would be a little political, because the ceasefire came in 97, and after that number of talks were held. There was a time when UPA government thought that they could reach the agreement, but it was opposed by the other provincial government. The fact was that I think throughout the UPA government, the government was weak, and there was no decisive say, because it was a coalition government. It required a lot of crutches, and it could not go against. And I think in this particular case, you have a strong government, and I think government has very sensibly done one thing. It has not publicized the whole negotiating process as well as the final terms of agreement. Now, this has actually prevented others from sabotaging the accord even before it was signed. Now an accord has been signed, even now the terms are not known. What is broadly considered is that the Naga aspirations of extending Nagaland beyond Nagaland have been met to a part, in part, without compromising the territorial sovereignty of other states. That is, you probably give them autonomy to the Naga inhabited areas in Manipur, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, and then probably create a union of those for certain issues, maybe cultural issues, educational issues. I am not aware of the details, but that is what is being worked out, so that the states don't feel that their territory has been taken. At the same time, there is a sense amongst Nagas that their area is together. As far as what Mr. Barua said, that apprehensions amongst Nagas that they will be overwhelmed by outsiders. In fact, the first special status in Indian constitution was granted to Nagaland when Article 371 came. In fact, 370 does not give a special status. It's only 371 which gives a special status, and that says very categorically that there are restrictions on outsiders moving into this particular area. Also, as far as movement into Myanmar is concerned, there's a border trade agreement, border movement agreement. People can move up to certain distance across the border, despite these artificial borders having come up by the creation of modern nation states. The restrictions, some amount of assuaging the traditional dislocation has been attempted by the state from time to time.
Okay. Dr. Koijam, I'll come to you now. How do you view this development at a framework agreement that will, you know, at least give us a starting point to end the country's longest running insurgency has been reached, and the fact that, you know, not much is available in the public domain, the details are now not out yet, so the optimism is somewhat subdued in some quarters.
No, I think what we must appreciate one for, you know, this ongoing talk or the negotiation, you know, though the terms talk and negotiation can have different meanings, has been going on for more than, what, 18 years, 19, if you really count it that way, and it has been fairly secretive right from the day one. It doesn't matter whether it is NDA or UPA government, things have not been that transparent. We know that, you know. In 2011, these things came out. Now people started mentioning a little bit of what happened in a BSF came, and that thing has been finalized there, and then a statement was signed. So one fact that we must acknowledge is that this particular negotiation has been fairly secretive. So there is nothing strange about the fact that you know, things have not been disclosed as of now. The other part is, as Narmata has already said it, a lot of aspirations. Fundamentally, Naga nationalist movement is founded on the principles that Nagas are not Indians, and therefore, I mean, by consent or conquer and anything of that kind, and they are an independent nation in themselves, and they need a state of their own. That has been the foundation of their nationalist movement. Negotiation had been going on right from the day one, I mean, before the independence itself. Some of the agreement which Namrata had mentioned are one of those things, you know, Haider Agreement and so on. Many schemes have been done. 1964, a group of Nagas were created. They said it's manufactured by Indian intelligence, NPC, and the 16-point agreement was signed and the state was created. And many try to reconcile to that idea as a kind of a halfway home, a stopgap affair for the moment to handle the violence in the 60s and the late 50s and early 60s. Now, what happened now, right now? I think this particular agreement, partly you can give credit to the present government, because if I remember correctly, the Prime Minister, when he came to power, he said it would be resolved within 1.5 years or so.
Right.
So in that sense, it seems to be in line with that promise. But it is also, we know that it is hastened seemingly because of the ill health of Mr. Isaac Su.
Right.
So, you know, it's a kind of a very emotional aspects to that one. So this is the general framework, as we know till today, is the recognition of not only Naga's unique history, but also their aspirations and their situations. On the other hand, officially now we can say that NAC and IM at least have accepted that supremacy, as you said, of the Indian Constitution within that framework. So these two things have been clear now. What are the nitty-gritties that will follow is the challenge, which incidentally
the
Mr.
nitty-gritties
Muiva
are
said.
not yet known, as
That's
many
a
have
challenge,
said, the
as
devil
Mr.
lies
Muiva
in the
rightly
detail.
said.
I have to take a break at this point in time. When we come back, we discuss what are the challenges that this framework agreement could face in its implementation. Stay with us. Welcome back to Insight. We are talking about the significance of the recently signed Naga peace deal. Dr. Goswami, I'll continue with you. Let's focus on the road ahead now. What are the challenges do you think this framework agreement could be faced with? One of the challenges that many are pointing out is the fact that, you know, the other faction, the NSCN-K, is not on board, and that is the group that has abrogated the ceasefire in March this year.
Yeah, I think one thing which we must very categorically understand is that the NSCN-IM and the NSCN-K are not similar insurgent groups. The NSCN-K is a very parochial group, a much smaller group, and the leader is not based in India. The second thing is that the NSCN-K has been divided many times. In 2011, two of the main leaders came out, Kithovi and Konyak. And again in 2015, they have been split. So they're not an organized and compact group like the NSCN-IM has been. The only threat NSCN-IM faced was in 2007 when one of its very lower rung leader, Azito Chopi, went out and formed NSCN unification, but then he disappeared from the scene. He merged with the NSCN-K. So that's the first pointer. I think the second pointer is that in terms of the context of why this peace accord today and why is it that, I think one point which Bimal made is correct, and that is Su is not well. He's been in Fortis Hospital, and so that could be one of the reasons why they wanted a particular framework agreement. The second thing is that I think the government of India was also worried because the NSCN-K had abrogated the ceasefire in March 27th, right? And that led to the ambush on June 4th. So there was a particular worry that if we do not have a framework agreement in place, it shouldn't be that the NSCN-IM also starts thinking of abrogating. Because if the NSCN-IM abrogates, the situation will be much more intense than the NSCN-IM abrogates. So that's the second point. I think in terms of the framework agreement itself, what I have got to know, like in today's Hindu, there was a report by some higher officials, they are saying that it's basically cultural integration and greater autonomy, right? Now that is, as Alok was saying, that was also on the table in 2012 under the supra-state structure, which Chief Minister Ibobi Singh supposedly kind of vetoed it. My point is that I think the most important challenge is how do you translate this kind of a non-territorial resolution into an acceptable framework for the states like Assam, Manipur and Arunachal, right? Now the key point to explain to the states is that this kind of a framework is actually in their interest, and I'll tell you why. It's in their interest because if you remember the NSCN-IM's major agenda, what was it? It was territorial integration of Naga inhabited areas. So what does this framework do? It does not take away territory from any of the states. It does not take away territory from Manipur, from Arunachal, from Assam. What it does is that these territories remain in these particular states. It only gives some special rights in terms of culture preservation and autonomy. So this actually addresses Ibobi Singh's anxiety. I was surprised that he vetoed the deal then, because I had written about it, and I was just looking up my writings today, and it's exactly, I had written this in 2012, and I'd argued that actually Ibobi Singh should strategically understand that this is in Manipur's interest, because it does not take away territory, right? That was the biggest fear in 2001 when the ceasefire was extended with the NSCNIM, when we had the Manipur State Assembly being burnt. There was a lot of assertion that this would include these areas in the greater Nagaland. So I think there is, this challenge is actually being met. I think, but I think the government should now come out not too late, because there is anxieties in the northeast about territories being broken up and new states coming up, right? So I think it's how you communicate to the people and communicate to local policymakers who doesn't seem to be involved beyond the point, because after all they're the representatives of the people. So they have to be taken into confidence and to be explained to them what does it actually entail for them in terms of their own right over their land, right?
Okay, let me bring in Professor Akoijam here, because you come from the state of Manipur. Many neighboring states have raised their concerns over this. How will it impact the situation in Manipur?
See, there are a couple of things we must understand this. By and large, the people in Manipur seems to be worried about their territorial integrity as such, even in Assam. But there are also segments, including something that I should supplement is, which is Ibobi's concern at one level is understandable and it's legitimate, because as the federal unit under Indian Union, what are the power structures and so forth of the state, whether it is an encroachment on that right of the state, what is the nature of these councils or whatever supra body that you are going to do? Is it going to undermine the political, legislative or executive or otherwise power of the state or not? And that's a major concern that Ibobi has it, or so does many of the people will have it. I think that's the major, I would suggest, that stumbling block. In Assam would, to some extent, will also, in fact, you see that Ibobi has kept quiet. Nothing has been said by him, but Tarun Gogoi has already came out.
Yes.
So these are the two states, and Arunachal, I don't know what they're going to say on this. But I think, on the other hand, we must also realize, these larger issues. What I think I just take off from what Narmata said. As a democratic country, as a system which operates within that kind of a parameters, I think it's too strategically it is important to talk, but at the same time it is also equally important for you to take these various stakeholders into confidence. You can't, it's not an imperial order where you decide, as Indira Gandhi famously said during 1971, those days are gone when people sitting miles away from us decide what to do and what not to do. I decide. If you remember when she responded to a BBC saying that about India's policy in South Asia, it is I decide, you don't decide out there kind of thing. So this kind of attitude might come in. And two, I think as a Manipuri, if I have to think, there is other issues, and I'll be honest about this. The terms like Naga majority areas or Kuki majority area, Meitei majority area or contiguous area. These are concepts not new in South Asia. If you remember, Muslim League's idea of Pakistan is precisely framed within that kind of a vocabulary, Muslim contiguous area, Muslim dominated area. And I think for a country which have experienced the difficulties of that kind of an ideology and politics, which haunts till today, whether would you encourage that kind of an ideology is another dilemma that any Indian leaders would face it. Along with the fact that you have this almost sounds intractable decades-old issues, how to handle it. So it's a very fine balance between the two.
Right.
Whether whether you encourage that kind of a politics, whether you will have an imperial model. In fact, I was a little disappointed in Prime Minister's speech because he says the frontiers. I mean, the concept of frontiers for me is an imperial and all. It doesn't operate in modern republican democratic nation-state order. I mean, this uses of you will take care of the frontier kind of a thing. It's a little unbecoming of the contemporary sensibility is what I felt.
Okay, I'll have Captain Bansal respond to that. How legitimate are these concerns? The fact that, you know, that there's this feeling that all stakeholders perhaps are not on board with this.
See, I think there are reasons for it. As I said, in Indian context, if you take every stakeholder into confidence, you may never be able to progress very often, because there are political issues, there are other issues. Within the Indian constitution, there are provisions. We have Leh Autonomous Council, we have Kargil Autonomous Council, we have Darjeeling Autonomous Councils that have in no way infringed upon the state's territory or the role. It has given certain powers, but you go to Darjeeling, you see virtually as far as an individual is concerned, his day-to-day thing is controlled by the Darjeeling Autonomous. Similarly in Leh or Kargil. The first part, the first step of implementation would be to create those autonomous councils within those states, which in no way infringe upon the sovereignty of the territorial integrity of the states. And then these autonomous councils can subsequently be amalgamated to create a supra body, as maybe for cultural entity or issues like that. That is how it would have to start. It is essential that you give it a little time before these details are released, because firstly on ground you should start working. In fact, one of the key ingredients of the success was even the Home Ministry was not aware as to what talk. So it was only between 2 or 3 individuals, and that is what is essential, because secrecy in this sort of negotiations are essential, because very often if the details are divulged before the time has come, you create problems. It has happened in past. You can there are numerous examples when before a deal was to be signed, a thing has been leaked out and there have been certain reactions, because people react emotionally without going into the details, and that could have sabotaged the whole thing. But the point is, Prime Minister has given a very clarion call that act east. He has negotiated with Bangladesh. We now have virtual transit. When a bus goes from Calcutta to Agartala via Dhaka, it's actually transit. The next is to improve northeast, and then he's going to Myanmar.
We'll speak about the implications, strategic implications as well in greater detail in just a bit. But Mr. Barua, you know, Nagaland's neighbors in the northeast, Assam, Arunachal, Manipur, they are all wary of integrating Naga inhabited areas, as they feel it will impinge on their territorial integrity. In fact, Tarun Gogoi has already said that he is going to fight this deal tooth and nail. Politically, how big a challenge is this going to be?
For the neighboring states?
Yeah, for the government to be able to...
Yeah, for the center, it will be a major challenge, and for MUIVA also, to sell the accord to its own people. Because all along, as I was speaking to some Nagas, they were saying that we fought for 60 years and to get what? These autonomous councils or these some kind of autonomy. We as the Nagas, the inhibition of this unification of the Naga inhabited areas in ingrained in their DNA. So they want to know what happened to the, even as we are reporting, the first question that was asked from my office was what happened to the greater Nagaland demand. So you see, it will, for the MUIVA also it will be a major challenge, and for the government also it will be a major challenge. Because the states, the ground realities, as MUIVA said in his speech, that had Mahatma Gandhi been alive today, the Naga problem would have been resolved long time back. In his speech at the Prime Minister's residence, he was right, because the ground realities in all the states. We saw the assembly being burned in Manipur. Why? Because the ceasefire pact was extended to the neighboring states. Imagine what will happen when the government says that they have a chance of integrating the Naga inhabited areas. So, and in the Assam itself, as in Manipur, Arunachal to a lesser bit, there are so many different militant outfits. Today we have a Dima Hasao militant group, which is demanding that Dimapur is the headquarter, and that Dimapur should be integrated with Dima Hasao district. Now, what do you do with such kind of situation? Because these tribal groups, most of them have their own militant outfit, and they are not willing to concede anything. So for Gogoi also, because why he said that? He was basically not addressing Delhi. He was addressing his own people.
Right.
Because he wanted to express their feeling that, okay, I am alert, I will ensure that nothing goes out of Assam. Because as it is, from Assam, Meghalaya was created. From Assam, Nagaland was created. So, so it will be very difficult for Gogoi as well as for Iwobi to sell this thing to its own people. And this is this apprehension that have made all of them alert.
Okay, Dr. Goswami, the fact that the agreement has been signed with just one faction of the insurgency. Of course, the other one you said is not even India-based. Yet, it is going to set off new problems. There is a threat of, a surge in violence in that area. Don't you think?
I mean, the fact is that the government of India has only been negotiating with the NSC and IM. I mean, it had a ceasefire with the NSC and K, but there were no peace talks. So that is the first fact. The second fact is that they were obviously talking to the most important group, and as I mentioned, the group that had presence across a particular small district or across like some of the Naga inhabited areas. Third, for all the negations of it, I think an insurgent group is able to negotiate from a position of strength when it's able to showcase social legitimacy and representation. And I think NSC and IM had been successful in proving that kind of legitimacy. Because if you see the civil society organizations, I have attended many of the people's consultative meetings of the NSC and IM. What I came away, and not just for pictorial purposes, but when I talked to young people and people, thousands used to come to these meetings. And then I interview, and so I know the local language too, which is the lingua franca. So you can make out the person who's from Nagaland, because usually they would know Nagamese, but from Assam, the Jemi Nagas are different. But you had representation from all across, whereas NSC and K was not able to pull that kind of. So organization per se is very important. I think the second point is that till now we don't know the details of the deal, right? So for Tarun Gogoi, of course he will say that, I'll not give away an inch of territory because of the historical reasons, as Kalyan was mentioning. But as I said, this deal, as far as the inputs we are getting, is not going to give away territory, which is the biggest anxiety of these states, right? So I think that's the second point. And I think the final implication of the deal is that one thing which we must also realize is that this deal means that the NSC and IM is now going to come for peaceful dialogue. And that means, as far as I understand from my research on peaceful dialogue, is that they're going to give up violence, which means that they might disarm. Now that is the possibility nobody has talked about, because that is the biggest breakthrough, because the NSC and IM has been the group which has been the most organized in terms of violence, has encouraged, for instance, Dima Hamlam Dauga, the group Kalyan is talking about. That is the area I come from, Haflong area. They actually got inspired by the NSC and IM. And most of the, so if this group disarms, can you see the implications of it? It's a big implication, and I think we'll have to think through the larger implication of it. The only place where I think the implication might not be so high is the Meitei-based groups, who have their own very good organization capacity, for instance, PLA and UNLF, who are not at ceasefire or negotiations at all. So there the implications I don't see to the extent that might be there for the other smaller groups.
All right, Captain Mansur?
Just wanted to say two things. Firstly, NSC and IM is the most powerful group in the entire Northeast, not only in Nagaland. I think that must be appreciated. The second fact is, you can talk of Khaplang or unification, which are actually, Khaplang's influence is by and large across the border, and to some extent in Tirap Changlang and some parts. But it is nowhere as powerful as IM is. The second thing, why Tarun Gogoi said and why Bobi Singh has not, I think the reason is very clear. Assam is going to polls. Manipur has long way to go. So obviously his immediate concern is the elections which are coming up, and he wants to take a more parochial line, more political line, because he belongs to the main opposition party, and you have a central government which belongs to another party. So he wants to actually, because last Lok Sabha polls very clearly showed that there was a huge depletion of his popular support. I think this could probably give him a chance to get back that support base, and that's why I think he was instantaneous in opposing it without getting to know the details, which to our belief does not incorporate any transfer of territory.
Okay, well with that it's time for me to slip into yet another break in the program. When we come back, we'll focus on the implications of this particular agreement on the people of Nagaland whose lives this deal is going to impact. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside. We are talking about the significance and implications of the framework agreement reached between the Government of India and the NSC and IM, an insurgent group from Nagaland. Professor, I'd like to continue with you. If we talk about the implications, they are bound to be huge. Dr. Goswami just touched upon one of the aspects, the security aspect. If this particular group gives up its arms, it's a huge achievement, don't you think?
Yeah, that's true. But let me say something very quickly. it's been going on for so many decades. First of all, so you must give the due credit to this NHNIM leadership and the government of India for coming to till this stage.
Right.
And that's a huge achievement. But as they said, devil is in the detail. When you go into the detail, I think being a seasoned rebel leader, Mr. Muivan knows it very well. That's why in his speech he talks about the challenges ahead. So I think one of the major challenges is, forget about Manipur or Assam or anything else, is because if the terms of anything that you might end up at the end of the day, what happened in Shillong Accord? Is it going to be, as Narmata flagged off, is going to be a huge issues within the Naga nationalist discourse. If it is more or less the same, why this bloodshed that we have gone through after 75? And you must also remember that we talk about K and IM so easily, but if you really look at the evolution of this group, post-Shillong Accord, Mr. Su and Muivan, much of those leaders were in Burma. It is precisely because of the Burmese Nagas and their sanctuary there, and they are able to fight it back, and this group was formed till the 1988 split, which is another tragic incident in the history of Naga nationalist movement, bloodshed within these groups. And now slowly K is out, and there are many theories behind how this has been isolated and so on and so forth. But within the Nagas, NNC's remnants, or it's still there is a group called NNC, then you have this Kevito group, then there's a Reformation group. But I think one of the successful strategy that has been done, what one can observe, is a wider consultation that has been done within Nagaland and the involvement of the legislature forum. And so that's a particular process where everybody is taken on board. But having said this, but still, why we have fought for sovereignty for so long? Is it going to be reconciled? Is it that some inter-ethnic community relation of Manipur gets riding piggyback on Naga nationalist issues? Are we being laid down because of that? And all these kinds of questions might come in, which is one of the major issues that this leadership of NHNIM or the government in India must take care of it, so that it doesn't result into another factions, and maybe the government in India might think strategically, now we can handle that. Even if a few people break away and start doing violence, we can crack down on that. We are powerful enough, and so on and so forth. And that kind of calculation, wearing this group out, many people have commented on this strategy that government of India has taken. That how the NHN, what was it in 1997, even Mr. Ravi himself was very critical, and he said at the point of the negotiation in 1997, NHN is not that powerful as we see today, kind of thing. People have commented on it. They are trying to wear them out over the years, all these strategies. But now, having gone through all these things, what we need to look forward is whether this particular government process, the positive side is the consultation that they are doing it, they should be able to take people on board, essentially first of all within Nagaland first, so that it doesn't crack up in another sense of dissent and violence, it should not happen. And second part is, we know Assam and Manipur will be another issues, and there you will have another problem. So it's not only Manipur or Assam. The problem is, first of all, Nagas should take their home front, keep your home intact first. So in Nagaland, all these people should be on board first of all, so that this particular peace deal can have some life and some chance. And that's the prayer that one can have it at the moment, and we should have that tactfulness. There should be no chest thumping, insulting words on those nationalists who have been struggling for this long. Don't say that we can crack down, we can deal with things came out on television and so on, avoidable phrases. But it should be sensitively dealt with it. This is a very, very deep-rooted national struggle for years on. You cannot simply brush it aside. And I think my vision is, there should be, as I said, in short, whatever happened in the past, forget it. Whether they can take people into confidence within the state, different segments, there are still 2 or 3 more groups, and wider consultation. They are on board, and peace should be given a chance to that place. And second set of issues is Assam, Manipur and others, which you have to deal with it in a very different sense. You cannot mix the two together.
All right. So as you said, it's a sensitive issue that needs to be dealt with sensitivity. Dr. Goswami, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think as Bimal is saying, I think language is very important, the kind of language you use to talk to each other. For instance, I remember in my work on conflicts in the Northeast, every time I would talk about it here, people would say, what should we give them? So the problem is, who are we and who are them, right? Everybody is equal, everybody is equally a part of this land. I think that's most important. I think the second thing which I think in the Prime Minister's speech also it's mentioned many times, and which, I mean, this is also very important historically, and that is the concepts of dignity, identity, unique history have been stated since 1918 in a submission to the Simon Commission in 1929. The Naga Club had actually again asserted that we are an ancient people, we are very different from the rest of India, and so we have our own dignity and culture. Again, as you see, this has been always a point of contention, right? Now my worry, and this is my worry, is that, for instance, when I know that Mr. Rijiju means very well when he says that this framework will actually bring the Nagas to the mainstream. But that again, that entire idea of bringing the Nagas to the mainstream is denying their unique history and culture and dignity.
Right, and that's such an issue.
Yeah, so that language framing has to be very careful, because that's exactly what they're fighting for. That who is this mainstream, and why is it that me being a Naga, my identity, my culture is not enough? You have to include me to be more Indian, and that for that I have to become more mainstream. But so language is very important, and Muiva, I mean, even it's interesting to me that even after the framework agreement says that the unique culture, dignity is important, again we are saying, I mean, the Indians, some of the representative of the Indian state is saying that this is how we'll bring the Nagas to the mainstream. That contradicts the whole.
But you know, the Naga society too has evolved in these years, and there are many, you know, young Nagas who are stepping out of that state, moving to other parts of the country for work, for studies.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you give up your identity.
I mean, for instance, it was never asked to, they were never asked to give up their identity. When you talk of mainstream, it means they would be able to move on the path of development, because all said and done, the northeastern states have not been able to develop as fast as the rest of India. I think when he said that he wanted that they should come into the mainstream, he meant probably as the rest of India is actually galloping ahead, the Nagaland would also, which has immense economic potential, would also develop. That's what I think. There was no attempt to make them more Indian, or as Namrata is alluding to, I think that was not his intent.
No, this term mainstream is irritation actually. Why the people of Northeast should come to the mainstream? How are we different? Do we have to learn dowry from you? We don't have a system of dowry. So what do we gain from this? Actually what he was saying is, Naga, it is a very insulting term. In Northeast, most of the people in meetings, seminars, we keep hearing, why should we join the mainstream?
Okay, but what is it that the youths there want? You know, what are their aspirations?
They want peace.
They want peace. You see, it's an insurgency hit area, a region. We have suffered insurgency for the last 60 years.
Right.
But then youth in Nagaland and the youth from, say, UP would be same. They would be probably doing the same thing.
Right.
So what have we got to learn from you? And our people have been beaten up in Delhi, tortured. I mean, every other day we have to report on such things. So what have we got to learn from you all?
Actually, I
think one thing I should say something on this. Let's be very honest. What is the difference between a youth in Mumbai or in Kolkata or Bengaluru and in Canada, in Montreal or in New York, in Paris? They would have the same thing, even neoliberal, Coca-Cola, rock music, career, earning money. But that doesn't deny the fact that these people are Indians, these people are Americans and friends. They will still fight for their identity, and they're concerned. You know, however the global economy is, France and Germany on one side and America on the other, Japan, Korea on the people will fight. So in a similar sense, even the youth of Nagaland wants the same mole culture and others. I would be quite skeptical if you said that, you know, their Naga-ness or certain historical awareness of what their forefathers have fought for has been completely forgotten. That would be too naive to look at that fashion.
And they wouldn't trade that for anything.
But of course their worldview is different. It doesn't mean that they have the same worldview as their grandfathers would have it. They have a different understanding of the world is today. Even that includes what India is all about. I mean, take my generation. I come from that far off place. I've been here for a long time. Grew up with certain sense of India and what is India. I've seen India so much. I know much more like than what you can learn India from your textbooks or Bollywood movies. I mean, you know, so we understand things better. So I don't think that these youths are the same as their grandfather was, but, you know, we should not also deny the fact that their own sense of who they are,
that has to be
what
respected.
they are, you know, and that must be, that's a mutual respect. And this country, if it has any hope, is this ability to understand the other and their culture, their ideas. And that is why, whether it is in riots, what you call it, Hindu-Muslim problems, or Dalit or others, this is basic inability to respect the other's culture and wanting to impose your vision on the other in the name of a nation or certain kind of ideology. That is the problem. At one level. So in that sense, we must be very careful about saying development is not the only issue. And some people say, remember, the Naga nationalist movement is one of those movements. We said that we demanded these things. It's not even demand, it's a struggle. And that's not because we are discriminated, not because we have been deprived of wealth or we are underdeveloped. No, it's not because of that. We fought for this because we are Nagas. I mean, that's the ideology. I mean, that historically, that's the point.
It's about the Naga identity.
So I think we should not forget that part. And,
okay, Captain Bansal, if we could talk about you know, the larger implications for that state, security-wise, I'm saying.
See, I think firstly, NSC and IM's coming to peaceful dialogue has a lot of connotation. Probably, as Namrata said, it eventually should lead to disarming and maybe amalgamation of the people who were actually involved in violent struggles into some organs of the state, because obviously the people who had picked up arms would have to be absorbed somewhere, because that's the only probably their incorporation into paramilitary forces or something would have to be probably worked out, some such thing would have to be worked out, or a rehabilitation package would have to be worked out. But what is significant is that this peace accord falls into a grand plan that this government has been making as far as Act East is concerned. And if you see, we had good negotiations with Bangladesh. We are actually now, this accord has come, and NSC and IM being the mother of all insurgent groups in the northeast, you would see its impact on other groups. As Namrata said, barring maybe a few Meitei groups in Manipur which are now aligned with Khaplang, it would see. Similarly, Khaplang has also been given a message, all said and done, that firstly, Indian government cannot negotiate with Khaplang. Since he's not an Indian national, can you negotiate with a foreign insurgent? I don't think so. Legally or constitutionally, that's possible. Secondly, it's been given a signal very categorically that here and after you are not going to be secure, even if you feel that you are hiding across the borders. Right. So I think there would be some pressure on him also to probably come to some sort of a negotiations or some sort of a ceasefire. And I think with this, Prime Minister is now expected to travel to Myanmar soon, and probably we are trying to take a developmental highway that would go through this particular region, so that the region, while respecting the cultural identity of the people, I think it has never been the intent of the government that anybody's cultural identity is compromised. In fact, all tribes must be allowed to preserve their unique cultural identity. In fact, institutions needs to be set up so that these cultural identities, cultural aspects can be studied, that unique, because all said and done, this Naga ethnic identity, they don't speak the same language, there are different, it's an evolved identity, let's be very clear about it. So all these identities, while being respected, I think what is required is that this region, which has not been able to develop commensurate with its potential, should be allowed to develop, and this should become the highway through which India's interaction with the rest of Southeast Asia and East Asia should undertake. And with this whole area will develop, and with this major insurgent group coming on board, I think the security situation, especially in Nagaland, would improve considerably, though of course in the immediate future there may be some turbulence in Manipur, because that is the state which I feel may have a little bit of problems in immediate future. I hope things will work out.
Dr. Goswami, I'll give you the last word. What does it change for Nagaland now that a major insurgent group is ready to give up arms?
I think there are three things which will happen. One is that people will feel their self-worth more, because the fact that the Prime Minister has said in a framework agreement that the Naga culture, history and their identity is extremely important. And I think we'll have to give credit to the interlocutor, Mr. Ravi, because I remember when Mr. Ravi traveled to Nagaland recently, I think one phrase which he said, which very much resonated with the Naga public, was that this is a negotiation between equals. and that really resonated. So that's the first point.
Right.
I think the second point is that, as Alok was saying, that
very briefly, we're out
yeah,
of time.
so basically the moment you have a major insurgent group coming for the peace talks and agreeing to give up violence, then you'll have businesses and investments going up. That will obviously be the second implication. And the third implication would be that hopefully the young people who come out of Nagaland because of the fear of violence and lack of opportunity will stay back.
All right.
That's the
All right. On that note, it's time for me to wrap up this discussion on Insight. I'd like to thank all my guests for coming to the studios. It was a pleasure having you here. That's it for now in Insight today. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.